All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lumiere Scholars Essay Award Writing Workshop. It's so great to see so many of you here. There was a bit of an issue with the large meeting add-on, but it's been sorted. I now see everyone else streaming into the room. It's great to see you all. Give me a second as I admit everyone. But my name is Dhruva. I'm one of the co-founders of Lumiere, and over the course of the next 35 to 40 minutes, we're going to be walking you through what the essay competition is, what we expect from entries to the competition, what good writing in general looks like, and answer any questions you have. Along the way, if there's anything that is confusing or unclear, if there are any questions, please feel free to throw your questions in the chat. Tung, who's here, will answer questions as we go along. And if there's anything left at the end that I haven't been able to get to, I'll answer them at the end as well. I have currently set it such that you can't unmute yourselves given the size of this webinar. But if you really, really want to unmute yourself, just put your hand up. I can then change the settings so that you can unmute and you can ask your question out loud. But let's dive in. Over the course of today, we're going to be talking about a few different things, but I wanted to start, as we always do, with a story, which is who are we and why do we do what we do? So writing has been a hugely important part of my life. I grew up in India, in a city in South India called Chennai, and I remember writing my first short story when I was 6 years old. And if anyone from the ages of 6 to 16 asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I kind of era after era of my life, to use Taylor Swift's phrase. In kind of middle school, elementary school and middle school, that was fiction writing. But when I entered high school, I started doing competitive debate. And so the kind of writing that I did became more writing debate cases, writing out arguments, writing rebuttal, doing all of these things to try and help me compete in the space of international debate. When I went to college, I studied economics at Harvard. The kind of writing that I did changed once again. I was doing research and doing writing in economics, which was quite kind of like dry and factual. It was trying to establish what my results were showing. It was trying to demonstrate why that mattered. And the writing was mainly in the form of essays and papers. And then at the end of college, I decided that I wanted to become a professional nerd. And so I went straight to graduate school. I did a master's and a PhD at Oxford in international development. And during my PhD, the writing changed again. All of a sudden, I had to write this 100,000-word dissertation based on the research that I'd done. And so that writing was entirely different. But through the entire period, the one thing that stayed constant is that the written word is something that I deeply love, that I've thought so much about. And I'm really excited that you guys are all thinking about it too, especially in the era of AI and ChatGPT, that's something that still resonates and that you care about. And so over the course of today, we'll be talking about what the award is, what the judging criteria look like, what the prompts are and how to understand them, what evidence looks like, and in specific, what credible academic sources are. We'll be talking a little bit about AI and originality, and we'll be talking about submission guidelines and formatting as well. So to take a step back for the competition, this is an essay competition born out of the company I run called Lumiere Education. And we run kind of virtual research programs for high school students. But at the core of that is we believe that curiosity drives progress. I didn't get to do actual research until I was in college, but I'm so glad that so many young people are thinking about it even earlier. And we think that when young scholars are given the chance to ask bold questions, gather evidence, and share what you all discover, there's a number of different things that happen. There are benefits to you. You sharpen your thinking, you improve your communication skills, but there's also benefits to society. You create ideas that can move society forward. And so that's the basis of the Lumiere Scholars Essay Award. We want to invite high school students to examine issues that matter to you and that matter to the world, crossing disciplinary lines, testing assumptions, and defending your arguments with rigorous evidence. This competition is open to anyone from around the world who's in high school. It's free to enter, and the goal is to celebrate all of y'all. The rising thinkers will be the researchers and public intellectuals of tomorrow. The essay has a few different awards. There's a first place award in each category, which has a $1,000 cash award as well as a full scholarship to our individual research program. The second place award is a $500 cash award and a $2,000 scholarship to the program. And then the Rising Scholars Award are $1,000 scholarships to the program. And so we have the opportunity for a number of different people to be recognized and win prizes through this competition. We put together an incredible group of judges. This is something we've spent a lot of time working on and that we're so proud of. These are all academics and researchers at some of the world's top universities. They've helped us in developing the competition and picking the essay prompts, and they'll also be involved in deciding who the winners are. And so when we're judging the competition, we're looking at 5 different things. The first thing that we care about is originality. This is your opportunity for your thoughts and your ideas to be valued. I think too often when we're in high school, we're told, learn what others are telling you, listen to what others have to say, do what it takes to pass the test. But you guys are capable of so much more than that. You're capable of thinking about the world and coming up with your own perspective, developing new and innovative arguments that other people have not thought about before. And that's what we're going to push you to do in this competition. Give us a point of view that no one else has had before and no one else but you could have, given your unique perspective, your personality, your experiences, and what you've read and understood about the topic. But that can't be driven just by your own feelings and emotions. You can't put forth an opinion and say, this opinion is true because I think it's true. It needs to be grounded with analysis and evidence. So the second thing that we care about is analysis. And analysis basically means kind of logic and grappling with the ideas that are already in the field that people have already put forward and explaining how they interact with each other. So how do you take something that is already there, explain it, and then explain both what's correct about it and what's wrong with it or what's missing from it, and how that then interacts with the next piece of evidence or next perspective that you're drawing on. That brings me to the third factor, which is a word I've been using but not defined, which is evidence. So evidence refers to the sources that you're using. What are the factual examples, the data points, the research, the existing evidence that you can point to support your argument and your points of view. This evidence needs to be rigorous, which means that it can't just be one person who's written a blog somewhere and posted their opinion. It needs to have been collected and analyzed in a careful way. It does not need to have been collected by you. In fact, we don't require you to do original data analysis or research for this essay competition. We encourage you to engage with the research that already exists and use that to support or disprove your point. Then you take all of this. You have your original idea, you base it on the evidence, you analyze it, and then the next part is structure and presentation, which is how do you then put that together into an essay that makes sense, is readable, and is clear to the judges. And so the structure is about logical organization. Is it very clear what the different sections of your essay are trying to do? What does the introductory section do? What does the next section do? What does the next section do? Are ideas being repeated between them, or are ideas developing? And your goal needs to be that ideas develop over time. Do you have a clear section where you talk about opposing points of view and do you refute them? And that's super important because as a judge is reading your essay, they might be thinking, oh, you haven't thought about X, you haven't considered Y, and you've got to be, oh no, I'm smarter than that. I have thought about X, I have thought about Y. In fact, in my essay, I'm going to mention X and Y and explain why they're wrong. And so that is part of the idea of structure, is you going, I'm going to present my idea in a clear flow of logic, and then I'm also going to have a section where I address counter arguments. And finally, presentation. You can have really good ideas, you can present in a really good structure, but people will take your thinking less seriously if it's riddled with grammatical errors, if the formatting is off, if the quality of the writing is poor. And so presentation is about how do you get your ideas across in using language effectively, using formatting effectively, and making sure that you're really dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So these are the 5 things we care about, and I think are pretty comprehensive in what makes a good essay. That brings me to our 6 prompts this year. Our essay competition is open to people across different fields in the humanities, in the social sciences, and the natural sciences. The goal of these prompts is for it to cover a wide variety of areas that people might be interested in, that engage with the world and what the big issues that are facing us as a society are, and that are accessible to young thinkers in the field. So in the humanities, the first question is, how should societies determine which past injustices deserve apologies and reparations from the state? Are people clear about what the word reparations mean? Does someone want to try and throw a definition in the chat? Any brave soul who wants to try and say what reparations is? Aparna says punishments. I think that's close. I think Erica says paying people for past wrongs. HVS says compensation, making of amends. That's exactly right. So reparation is a kind of catch-all term. It could include kind of public apologies. It could be money. It could be policies that are set up to help a certain group of people. It could be affirmative action, like setting aside seats at educational institutions or in jobs for people. Whatever it is, it's a way of saying a group of people have been wronged historically, and the state or society and the people who are currently in power are going to try and do something to make that right, to give something back to those people. And so this debate is this prompt is asking, how should a society decide which ones deserve apologies and reparations, given that over history there are many groups of people that have been treated poorly by others? The second question is, how might popular culture reshape our understanding of the world around us? So popular culture refers to the kind of music, movies, books, media that are not the like elite, high status opera and classical music and so on, but it's what's being created right now. It's Taylor Swift, it's K-pop, it's John Green and his novels. So these are books that some of our English teachers or the critics might look down upon, but that are immensely popular, commercially successful. And the question is, how does that popular culture reflect what's happening in the world around us and then reshape that world around us? So those are in the humanities. The humanities covers kind of history, English, so a little bit of sociology, media studies, those kinds of fields. The next two questions are in the social sciences. So economics, political science, public policy, those areas. The first question in the social sciences is, what kind of social problems are chatbots, i.e. Especially generative AI chatbots, good at solving? And what kinds of social problems are they bad at solving? So we're seeing the applications of chatbots in a huge variety of areas. You're seeing chatbots that are meant to replace therapy. You're seeing chatbots that are meant to help with loneliness. You're seeing chatbots that are meant to help people learn in educational settings. And the question is, given that chatbots are really exploding right now, and lots of companies, governments, nonprofits are building chatbots, how do we think about a framework for understanding what are chatbots good at solving and what are they maybe less bad at solving? And in fact, are there things that they might make worse? And so there you've really got to think about first what chatbots are, how they work, think about some of the different areas they're applied to, and then make an argument based on the characteristics of chatbots, what types of problems they might be good at solving and what ones they might be bad at solving. The other social sciences question also relates to kind of the internet and new technologies. And the question is, what is the future of social media as a tool to challenge those in positions of power? So you guys might be a little young to remember this, but back when social media was exploding, Twitter in particular, people thought that this was going to destroy autocracies, make us all democratic. The idea was social media was a way of connecting each other. We would now be talking to people in different countries. We'd be talking to people in our own societies. We would be discussing issues. We would be going beyond kind of the ignorance that we have. And as a result of that, we would be understanding each other and forming stronger relationships. Social media also was thought as a way of bringing truth to the surface. The idea was all of us have phones. Anyone can take a picture and put it up on Twitter of something bad happening in our neighborhoods or our communities. And then other people would then come to your support, would protest, would lobby to get that changed. Of course, now we've seen things play out very differently with the rise of polarization and kind of the algorithms underlying a lot of the social media, we're actually seeing that it's creating echo chambers where people of similar opinions are coming together. We're seeing it being used by governments and big corporations as a tool of suppressing dissent. So the question this is asking is, as social media continues to develop, as new social media come up, as there are different ways of how we engage with social media, can it be considered, is there a future for it to challenge those in positions of power, or will it only serve to strengthen those in positions of power? So those are in the social sciences. Finally, in the natural sciences, so this is kind of physics, chemistry, biology, those kinds of fields. We have a question which is about, once again, social media, but in a very different way, which is not about the kind of public policy or social effects of social media, but rather the psychological effects of social media on teenagers in particular. So how do modern internet-based social media affect adolescent emotional and social development? How does it affect when you're coming of age in middle school, in high school, in an incredibly online society where everyone is chronically online, no one is touching grass? What does that mean for you as a person, your brain development, your biochemistry, your kind of conceptions of yourself and others? How does it affect your emotional and social development? And finally, the last question is one that, to be honest, is not an area that I am an expert in, but I'm sure there might be some people in here. So there's a question which says, what can be accomplished with 1,000,000 noiseless qubits? Which my understanding, and Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a question from quantum physics. And as quantum computing rises and increases in power and awareness, the question is, what does that tool and technology hold for the future of society? So that's at the intersection of physics, computer science, electrical engineering, things like that. So these are the 6 prompts for this year. I think that they're speaking to some of the biggest questions of our time, and I am really, really excited for them. I see a lot of conversations in the chat about it as well. The conversation is progressing a little bit too fast for me to keep track of while also speaking. So Tung, who's part of the team, is going to be keeping an eye and responding to things that we can. And if there are questions that aren't answered at the end, we'll have some time to get back to them as well. Awesome. So let's talk about how to pick a prompt and write about it. So the first thing to do is to choose a prompt. That can be hard. Someone asked a question in the chat which says, can choosing a topic which is niche increase the chances of winning? It could, or other people could think the same way and choose to write for that prompt. The prompt that you think is niche might not actually be that niche, and there might be other people that pick that prompt as well. And so I would say read through the prompts and find something that speaks to you. Maybe pick 2 prompts that you're excited by, and then learn a little bit more about it. Go on ChatGPT and ask it to explain that topic back to you. Go on Google and read up about it. Watch some videos on YouTube about it. Try and do a little bit of background research on that topic and start taking, and the important thing for you to do is take notes as you do that research, because I promise you, if you think you'll remember something, by the time you're reading your 4th article about it, you will have forgotten where you got the information in the first article from. So take good notes when you're doing your research. And based on that, try and see which topic you find interesting, as well as which topic you feel like you've got a unique perspective on. You might start developing an idea as you start reading, and you might go, okay, this is actually a pretty smart idea. It's an interesting idea. I'm not seeing it reflected in my research. Let me try and dig a little bit deeper into that. Once you've done that and you've picked your prompt, go way deeper. The idea of academic work is you are entering a conversation. These conversations have been going on for years, if not decades and centuries in some cases. So the worst thing for you to do is pretend like you are coming up with something that no one has ever thought about before, because our judges probably have read more about this topic than you do. And so they might go, oh, Sharanya is saying no one's talked about this before, but I've literally read 3 books about this last week. And so what you've got to do is learn as much as you can about the field, about what other people have said about that question, and what the main schools of thought are. So the term school of thought means basically ways of thinking about something. What are different perspectives? What are different kind of camps? Some people might approach a topic in one way. Another set of people might have a different perspective on it. So select the key perspectives, usually about 3 key perspectives, 2 to 3 key perspectives on the topic. And then try and understand, how can I, based on those perspectives, add something to the conversation? How are these 2 camps maybe not speaking to each other? Or how could it be that there's something missing in perspective A and there's something missing in perspective B, but when you bring those perspectives together, it gets closer to the truth? Or this perspective makes a lot of sense, but if you consider this other piece of evidence, this other example, this other case, it actually changes how you would think about it. And so that's where point 3 comes in, which is supporting and analyzing with evidence. So you might say, in the case of the prompt about social development and of psychological development, social media, you might be making the argument that, hey, actually, a bulk of the research so far has focused on the effects of text-based media on adolescents' mental and physical health and images. But we're entering an age of video and AI where that is the core of what adolescents are consuming. And that fundamentally changes how we need to think about adolescent mental health. And here's my arguments based on the evidence for how the future of video, and especially AI-generated video, is going to change people's mental health going forward. So that could be an example of how you say, here's what exists. There's all of this literature on written and image-based things. I'm going to recap that to prove that I know it. And then I'm going to contribute by taking it forward by talking about videos and AI. So that could be an example of how you use evidence to move the conversation forward. That said, even with something like that, there are likely already other viewpoints. There might be some researchers who are doing research on it. There might be news articles. There might be op-eds. There might be interviews. And so you should make sure to consider the views that might challenge you and address them upfront in your essay. In debate, this is called rebuttal. So the word rebuttal means responding to somebody else's opinion after they have offered it. Rebuttal is addressing their opinion before they even say it. And so you might say, here's my argument. Here is a counter argument that has been made or that might be made. And here's why that counter argument does not stand or that counter argument does not apply. So addressing other people's viewpoints, which might be different to yours, is really important in making a compelling case in your essay. And then the final step is to, once you've written an essay that you think is good, maybe let it sit on your Google Drive for a day or 2, come back to it, read through it, realize what a mess of ideas it is, and then restructure, revise, edit, maybe give it to somebody else to read to see if it all makes sense to them. And by going through a few different drafts of your essay, make sure that your essay is as concise and focused as possible. That's really driving to the endpoint that you want, that every part of it is as clear as possible. So here's a sample case study. This is a question that is not on one of our prompts, but I'm using it as an example. How should schools balance the opportunities of AI with the need to protect educational integrity? It's funny because I see that there are some questions in the chat about AI. I'm going to talk about it in a second in more specific detail, but this is asking, let's assume that there was a prompt that said, how should schools think about AI and educational integrity? So you might frame your essay around these 2 schools of thought, which says there's short-term efficiency gains in using AI. Maybe research shows, I don't know for sure, but maybe you find that research shows that as soon as you introduce AI into a classroom, students are able to immediately, they start learning better, they start writing stronger essays, they start doing better on tests. But then there might be another school of thought that says in the long term, schools are meant to achieve XYZ outcomes. It's meant to develop deeper thinkers. It's meant to develop the ability to engage with society. And you might then use a framework such as digital ethics or educational equity, which means digital ethics is saying this is the kind of rules of philosophy around what is right in the online world, or educational equity, which says everyone should have equal access to a high quality education, to then understand that distinction between the short-term efficiency gains and long-term learning outcomes. What do I mean by that? Let's say your framework is digital ethics. You say, I'm going to approach this essay from the perspective of digital ethics. You might then say, hey, there might be short-term efficiency gains from students using AI, but in doing so, they're giving up enormous amounts of personal data to these large corporations that run these AI chatbots. And that then hurts it then has effects on copyright, has effects on their ability to own their own ideas. And so from a digital ethics perspective, the long-term outcome of this is negative to education as a whole. So that would be an example of how you use digital ethics to compare the short and long term. An alternative way is, let's say you talk about educational equity and you say, hey, there are short-term efficiency gains, but unfortunately, access to AI is incredibly unequal. It depends on if you speak English, if you have access to the internet, if you have access to electronic devices, which both in the US as well as internationally is very, very different in different societies. And so in the long term, you're creating significant inequality by pushing the use of AI. And therefore, educational equity would say the short-term efficiency gains are not worth the long-term learning outcomes unless we're able to do X, Y, Z to make access to AI more equal. So that's kind of how you would use a framework to then highlight the difference between two schools of thought. There you then use evidence, and whichever argument you're making, you would use evidence. For example, things like plagiarism, loss of critical thinking versus the benefits of personalized learning, accessibility. This evidence could be factual example. So you might say, here is an example of a school in Texas that used AI and introduced AI. Here's how it played out across the 1,000 students in their school. Here's what the quotes from their teachers say. You might use academic research and you say, in a survey done of 1,000 educators, here's what the respondents said. So you could use examples which are either event-based or numerical, statistics-based. The only type of example that you should not be using in an essay is a deeply personal example. So you shouldn't be saying, when I use AI, here's what ends up happening, or here's what I've seen in my school, because you don't know if that, we have no way of verifying that. No one has a way of verifying that. And we don't know if that's just true of your school or if it's true more generally. So when you're using evidence, use either examples that are established sort of in the news, in research, or data and statistics from that research. You would then address counter arguments, like the idea that banning AI may widen inequality or stifle innovation. And as I said, you might conclude by saying, okay, here are practices or policies that balance innovation while preserving academic honesty and deep learning. So that would be an example of a pretty strong essay in the field that is engaging with existing perspectives, using evidence, putting forth an interesting perspective, and also dealing with counter arguments. I'm just going to pause there and skim through the chat. There's a question about, is this a research essay? So there's a distinction here, which is you do not need to do primary research, which means you are not expected to. And in fact, you probably should not be analyzing data sets yourself, running statistical regressions, interviewing people, or doing focus groups of your own. But you do need to be basing it on existing research. So you need to draw on existing research in order to write your essay. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but just to wrap up, what makes a strong argument? It relies on strong evidence. It provides the right context for that evidence and then clearly connects it to your argument at every point. Great, let's talk about research, because I see that there's a lot of interest in the chat about that. So we do expect you to do your research, and doing research means using reliable sources and being clear about what sources they come from. So you need to be using citations when you're doing your essay. A citation is simply a way of attributing a piece of work or an evidence or a point of view to somebody else when you are borrowing it or adapting from somebody else. So if you ever use a fact, a statistic, or a piece of data from a source, you need to add a citation. When you quote or paraphrase someone else's idea, you need to be citing them. When you refer to theories, models, or academic arguments, you need to be citing them. This is important because in academic writing, the biggest kind of moral gray line, or the kind of moral thing that you can do that is kind of the worst moral crime, is to try to steal somebody else's work as your own. We are engaging in a marketplace of ideas. Our ideas are what we have and what gives us value. And so if you're using someone else's ideas, if you're using someone else's work, you need to give them appropriate credit. It also strengthens your argument, because if you can show that a fact, a statistic, a quote comes from someone that's well regarded, that is legitimate, that has done a lot of deep work, then it actually strengthens your argument, because we then think as readers and judges that you are more credible because you are basing this on the work of someone that we view as credible as well. And finally, it also allows readers to then, if they want to dig deeper into that topic, learn more, to find the sources and go deeper as well. So in terms of how you do it, we require you to use the MLA citation style. There's loads of guides to this online. So you use in-text citations with the last name of the author and the page number that you got that from. If it's from a source without a page number, there's a set of kind of guidelines around how to do that as well. And at the end of the essay, you provide a full reference list, and you make sure that your citations match between what you do in text, which means you're in the essay, and then in your reference list at the end. So if you're citing an academic journal article written by Lisa Smith and John Woo and another person, you might say Smith et al. And if you're quoting something from the 452nd page of that paper, you would say Smith et al. 452 in the essay. And then at the end, in your reference list, you would have the name of the person and the co-authors, the name of the article, which journal it came from, which volume, and so on. Similarly, if you're citing a book or a government report, you would do it similarly. If you're doing a website, you would name the website if it doesn't have an author, or you would name the author if it does. We put all the citations in MLA at the end of the research paper. Yes, you would. And no, the citations are not part of the required, of the word limit. So how do you identify a credible source? The first thing you should look for is whether or not the article or book has been peer reviewed. Does anyone know what peer review is? Can someone who knows what peer review is put it in the chat? There's a question about, do you need footnotes? You do not need footnotes. In the MLA citation style, you do in-text citations. So that is what you do instead of footnotes. Other professionals review to make sure it's right, reviewed by other scientists. That's exactly right. So peer review is when an academic researcher writes a paper or a book, and before it's published, other academics who are experts in the field read through it and make a decision about the quality of it, whether it should be published or not. Excuse me. And if they think it is getting close to publication but needs changes, they can make comments, ask for revisions before it gets published. And so most prestigious academic journals like Nature, Lancet, and so on are peer reviewed. And usually you can find on their website if it's peer reviewed or not. The second kind of benchmark you can use for a credible source is the expertise of an author. If it's like an anonymous Reddit troll who is writing something, probably not an expert in the field. Whereas if you can look at the author's qualifications, do they hold a PhD? Have they been working in the field for 20 years? Are they from a reputed institution? Have they published a lot in the field before? Then that automatically means that that article that they've written, the research that they've done, is likely to be more credible than someone who does not have that expertise. Third thing you can look at is the reputation of the publisher. So there are lots and lots of books, for example, that are self-published. Anyone can self-publish a book. So something being in a book does not mean it's true. Whereas if it has been published by a reputed publisher like a university press, like Cambridge University Press, if it's from a government institution or an international institution or a reputed publishing house, then it becomes more likely that what's in that article, in that book is true. Because if it isn't, the reputation of the publisher is on the line. And so they're likely to have fact checkers and folks in-house checking this as well. The next thing is try and think critically about what the purpose of that source is. Like, is it published on a website, in a journal, where the goal of that journal is to push forward a specific point of view? Or is it being published in a place where the goal is to publish the truth and get as close to the truth as possible? So if the source is objective, research-focused, rather than opinion-driven or promotional, then it's much more likely to be taken seriously. So if you're doing a research paper on I don't know, like on the number of car accidents in the United States, and you quote a research paper by the UN versus a research paper from the website of an organization called bancars.com, it's clear that the UN is more reputable because bancars.com has a clear point of view where they want us to ban cars. And so, of course, they're going to be highlighting and potentially even exaggerating or lying about the number of car accidents there are. Recency is super important. The more up-to-date the information is, the better and higher quality that evidence is. And then finally, transparency and the quality of the evidence. Are they clear about what their methodology is, what their sources are, and what kinds of proof they're using to back up their claims? So there's a number of free and credible resources like ResearchGate, Google Scholar, PubMed, academic books, governmental and international organizations. Sources to avoid are any personal blogs. Wikipedia is a great starting point for you to learn around a topic, but you should never be citing Wikipedia. You should be citing the source that Wikipedia cites. So if you go to the end of the Wikipedia article, there's a section called sources. So you should be going into that source and using that rather than Wikipedia itself. Social media is another source to avoid. Biased advocacy sites like bancars.com and any non-peer-reviewed or opinion articles without evidence. I see a hand up. If you could just put your question in the chat so that we can respond to that, that would be good. There's a question that says something like the New York Times is a source. Yeah, news websites are a really interesting middle ground. It depends a little bit on which news source it is. Is it a news organization like the New York Times or the Guardian that has been around for 100+ years and has a deep and serious reputation? Or is it a news source that started like 2 weeks ago by someone random as part of their advocacy efforts? So the longer an institution has been around for, generally the more trustworthy it is. But even with news sources, I would say they often, when they're doing articles, don't necessarily do the original research themselves. I'm going to try and get rid of the annotations on screen. Dipanshu, if you could please stop doing that, that'd be appreciated. So I think with news articles, if you dig a little bit deeper beyond what they're saying into who are the experts they're citing or what is the research that they're quoting, and then talk about those experts or talk about that research, that might be stronger than you just citing the news article itself. Awesome. AI, I've seen about 5 questions in the chat about the use of AI, and I promised you we're going to get to it, and here we are. So AI is an amazing tool. I use it all the time. ChatGPT is one of my best friends. But at the end of the day, for this essay competition, your ideas, arguments, and analysis must be created by you and not copied from others. So the goal is that you express your thoughts in your own style and words, even when referring to existing research, that you don't imitate someone else's language, structure, or insights too closely. And originality means bringing new perspectives or interpretations, not just repeating facts. So you are responsible for every step of the essay, from research and planning to drafting and revising. You are not allowed to hire or depend on others to write or substantially shape your essay. Other people, AI tools can be used as learning aids or thought partners. So what that means is you are encouraged to talk to other people about your essay, talk to ChatGPT, go back and forth with it about your idea, ask it for competing points of view, use that to deepen your argument, ask it to help you find additional sources of information, and then use all of that to then go, okay, here's what my point of view is. So that's kind of how I would recommend doing it. Not use AI to actually write the paper yourself. Oops. Importantly, what that means is that participants are required to declare any use of AI tools in connection with their essay. If AI was used, they must clearly specify the extent and purpose of its usage. Any use of AI that is beyond kind of the rules of that have been stated can and will negatively impact the evaluation, and extensive reliance on AI, if we suspect it, may result in disqualification. What this includes is, for example, if we suspect that AI is used, we might ask you to send over screenshots of your ChatGPT logs of where you have said you've used it and how you've used it, so that we can then verify whether or not you used it in the way that you expressed in the in your note. Finally, at the end of the day, as you guys all know, human beings, AI kind of checkers are all only so reliable. And the thing that I would recommend thinking about is the goal of this essay competition is for you to be able to develop your thoughts, to think and learn how to learn. And that goal is missed if there's an over-reliance on AI. And so I would recommend that you think about this as an opportunity to learn how to think and build deeper thoughts, and kind of use AI in a way that feels responsible and morally right for you. Awesome. Style. Let's talk briefly about style. I'm just trying to look through the chat. How many submissions are there? We expect about 4,000 submissions. You're all nerds. That is true. I think we all are. There's a reason we're choosing to spend our Sunday on a call about argumentation and essay writing. Cool. I think if there's anything else, you can respond there. Emmanuel, I see your hand is raised. If you could just put your question in the chat, then we can answer it as we go along. So clear and formal writing uses formal academic language. This does not mean your words need to be 17 letters long. You can use simple language, but it needs to be clear and formal. You should not be using slang or casual expressions like, this paper did not eat. Like, I don't know. Like, just be thoughtful about the language you're using, and make sure that it's language that you would feel comfortable with a teacher, a professor, your admissions office when you apply to college, and the judges reading and judging you by. Make sure to follow a clear essay structure, that there's an intro, a body, and conclusion to your essay. Keep your writing concise and to the point. Don't be wordy or vague. You should, once you're done writing your essay, read through it and go at every point, am I using 5 words to say something when I could be using 2 words to make the same point? There's also crutch phrases that you might find yourself leaning on. So for example, some people like the phrase "that is to say," or "that suggests that." Like, there are these phrases that you might find yourself using over and over again. Make sure to cut that out, because that can be very distracting to the reader. Would recommend skipping contractions and first person. So I would recommend saying this essay argues that, rather than I argue that, and then you writing out contractions. So rather than saying don't, say do not, or cannot instead of can't. In general, use the active voice rather than the passive voice. That makes your essay feel more energetic and more readable. Ensure logical organization through the essay, and don't mix in personal opinions or personal anecdotes into the essay. Make sure that whatever whatever evidence you're using or whatever arguments you're citing can be cited and referenced in your reference list. So here's an example. People today really need stronger rules about pollution because it's harmful and makes people sick. Research shows it's a serious problem. An improved version of that might be, environmental regulations should be reinforced to reduce the serious health threats linked to pollution. That makes it very clear what the harm is, And then you're basing that in evidence. Studies demonstrate that greater pollutant exposure is associated with higher rates of respiratory illness. You're not just saying makes people sick, you are pointing to a specific kind of sickness, i.e. respiratory illness, and you are pointing to evidence, a research paper by Smith, to demonstrate that this is true, and that therefore strong policy measures are necessary to address these public health concerns. Awesome. So that's kind of the prompts, how to think about them, how to use, develop arguments, how to write clearly. Let's quickly talk about what the kind of bigger picture submission expectations are. So the first thing is it needs to address one of the 6 prompts directly. This is sometimes harder than it seems. Like, you might start with a prompt, start writing, and then realize that halfway through the essay, you've kind of veered off in a different direction. So make sure you have the prompt in big letters up top in your document, and then you keep going back to it and go, is my essay and is my argument actually responding to this prompt or not? The second is the essay needs to be less than 2,000 words, excluding citations and references. It should use MLA style citations for both the in-text citations and the work cited list. The essay should have no personal identifiers. So the text that you put in the form asks for your name, your school, and other details, but the text of the essay itself should not have any of those personal identifiers, so that the judges can evaluate this as objectively as possible. Make sure your essay has been proofread for formatting, grammar, and spelling. You can use Grammarly for that part, but you shouldn't be using Grammarly's AI tools, for example, to write things for you. The submission form requires you to declare any AI usage, and this is something that, as I said, we can ask for more evidence or information on. And finally, the deadline for submissions is November 2nd, so make sure that your essay is submitted by then. That brings me to the end of the presentation. We have about 5 or so minutes left to before we need to wrap up. So I will go through questions in the chat now, but just to take a second to say, I really appreciate the nerdiness of doing this. I really respect that. I think you guys are all way ahead of the curve for thinking about these topics, for being willing to engage, for digging into them and building your thinking and writing skills through doing something like this in high school. I'm so excited to read all of your entries. I won't be reading all of them, but I'll be reading some of them, and I'm excited to see what kinds of arguments and ideas you put forth. If you have any further questions that weren't addressed in this call, you can email me at dhruva.pat@lumiere.education. And if, as things progress, you have any other questions, feel free to drop us a line. You are free to leave now if you have no further questions, but let me look through the chat and see what questions are there. If a biased website is more accurate with news reporting than these so-called reputable news sources are actually suppressing the truth and putting up fake statistics, what should we do? Especially if such evidence challenges the reputable news sources. Good question. So you can make that argument in your essay. So for example, you can say, there's this big article from the New York Times claiming X, but here's a set of evidence about the person who wrote it, about the alternative perspectives that actually disproves that. In fact, the point of this essay competition is for you to be able to challenge ideas that other people might not be challenging. And so totally fine for you to challenge those ideas. Citations in the middle of the essay will be excluded from the word limit too. Yeah, both in-text citations and final reference list is excluded. How to make your essay stand out. I think that's what this entire presentation was about. If you do all of the things that we talked about in this presentation, I think your essay will stand out. Make sure that it is a unique and interesting perspective that addresses the prompt, that is based in the existing literature, uses good evidence, and is written well. Where will the recording be posted? We'll email it out to all of you. What does 8th edition MLA means? I would recommend Googling that. There's lots of resources on how to use MLA 8th edition citation styles. Is it allowed for us to write more than one prompt? No, you pick a single prompt. There's a question in the chat, which is very good, Tung, which says, how do people submit? So could you please put a link to the essay competition's website in the chat? Can we talk about personal background in a vague way if it relates to the prompt? I would recommend only really talking about your personal background, maybe in the introductory section of a paper to set the tone for why this topic matters and why you're writing about it. In the actual, as you go into the argument, I would recommend relying on academic sources and formal sources rather than your personal background and experiences. Is it single or double spaced? It doesn't matter because you'll be uploading through a form, so you can just copy and paste it into the form. Single space is fine. Do you recommend making essays influenced mostly by sources of facts, or do we keep a balance between our views and facts? You need to be providing a point of view, a perspective, an argument that is based on the facts and existing research. So the goal is never that you're just saying things for the sake of saying things because you believe them, but rather that you're putting forth a perspective based on the evidence. Awesome. What are the more niche mistakes that students make that are immediate red flags? I think we've covered a lot of those. Not addressing the prompt is a big one. Not having a clear argument that is stated up front is another one. I would say whatever your argument in the essay is, you need to be able to summarize it in one sentence, and that one sentence needs to be in the first or second paragraph of your essay, and then also in the conclusion to your essays. What are the list of possible awards? You can find that on our website, which is in the chat. Some people are requesting others to stop spamming. You guys are all heroes. How many rising scholars will there be? It depends on actually how many applications we receive. So that's a decision that we have not taken yet. Are we allowed to cite YouTube videos? It depends on who the video is from and kind of the reliability of it. But I would say if there's a YouTube video that's talking about something, try and find the underlying sources that person used to make their video and cite those sources instead. In general, YouTube videos would be considered not a reliable source. What's the deadline? November 2nd and 3rd? 2nd? 3rd? Which one was it? 2nd, November 2nd. Would it be okay to include controversial topics? Absolutely. Please feel free to engage with ideas that are considered controversial, that are considered kind of debatable. That's the whole point of the essay competition. What's your hair care routine? Sulfate-free shampoo and conditioner, only air drying, no towels or heat, and then leave-in conditioner and curl cream. Can we answer 2 of the questions or just one of them? Only one prompt. Can we brainstorm with AI? Yes, you may. How many arguments are you recommended to write? I would recommend that your essay has one clear argument that might have subpoints under it that you develop over the course of the essay, but it should have one line where, think about it from the perspective of the reviewers. A reviewer might read 5 essays in the course of 1 or 2 hours. And then the question is, at the end of that hour or two, what is going to stick out about your essay? If your essay is making 17 different points, then it's less likely to stick out than if it's making one really clear point that they keep coming back to. Like, I want to be reading essays that I think about 2 days later, being like, oh my gosh, that changed how I look at this topic. I'm still thinking about this thing and this argument, this perspective a few days later. Perfect. We are running out of time and I am running out of breath. So I'm going to thank you all for attending and for participating in the competition. If there's anything that we have not answered, I will send over the recording. Watch that over the course of the next couple of days. Look through the website, Google your question. And then if all of those don't answer your question, feel free to email us and we would be very happy to answer them. But thank you for attending and good luck with the writing. See you, everyone.